All right. Hello, hello. This is the first time I am going live on YouTube and Instagram at the same time, trying to give you options to be able to share the things that we talk about here on Instagram in an easier capacity. So, if you are ever loving something that we go over here in a live and you're wanting to share it with others who don't have Instagram, check out my YouTube channel, Emily Carolyn Baker. The link is here in my Instagram profile, and you should be able to find videos for some of my lives. Moving forward, it should be most all of them, but it's a new thing we're working on practicing over here, and hopefully those of you who are watching this live on YouTube, it's working for you. Right now it's showing me a blank screen, so if you're on YouTube watching this or you're watching the replay, I apologize if there's a blank screen here. Just still working on getting my team together to help with all of this. It's a one-woman show right now, so if you've got a blank screen while you're watching this, you just get to enjoy the sound of my voice. Think of it as a little podcast episode for you here. So, with all of that being said, let's go ahead and dive in, because I'm excited to talk with you on this topic today because it's one that I know a lot of people struggle with. And the interesting piece about this is we are not even going to be approaching this topic of questioning versus speculation by trying to define each one and say what's good and what's bad about questioning and what's good and bad about speculation, right? That's not even the approach we're taking today. Right? The approach we are taking today is actually looking at the differences in how masculine and feminine communicate, approach problems, and specifically define truth and the purpose of questions, right? Because this is really where sort of that distinction shows up. Right? And for those of you who are new or not familiar, anytime I'm talking about masculine and feminine, I am referring to masculine and feminine energy. There's a post pinned on my Instagram account that will walk you through a basic introduction, but I'm not always referring to gender, personality, sexuality, like anything like that. These are two collections of traits, and from each one of those perspectives, we can use it to help break down and understand things. And sometimes we find lots of correlation between things like gender and personality, right? And masculine or feminine, right? But that's not necessarily always the case. Right? So, all of that being said, let's dive in. Okay? So, when the feminine is asking a question, the purpose of asking a question is to start a conversation. The feminine is naturally about communication and using that communication as a way to explore ideas, right? The conversation is about brainstorming, it's about processing, it's about having that opportunity to sort of see what are all the possibilities. Okay? Now, this is very different from masculine communication and masculine questions. Right? From masculine perspective, communication is not the highest priority. In fact, if you think back to looking at this from kind of a primal human evolutionary standpoint, right? Traditional roles of the time where men go out fighting, hunting, right? And you needed to be able to communicate non-verbally, right? If you're talking, something must really be wrong, right? Because we don't want to be spooking the animal we're trying to capture, right? So you have to have a really good reason for why you're talking, and we need to have other types of communication, and we're focused on this singular goal and this singular outcome, and really action oriented, right? Whereas you have women who are gathering berries and taking care of children, right? And so there's lots of communication. Communication is a necessary part to be able to say, oh, I already picked some over here, you go look over there, watch out, Tommy's trying to run into the river, right? All sorts of things. Communication is active, it's necessary, it's part of that. And so obviously a generalized way of looking at it, but I find that analogy sort of helps me put an image to some of these ideas, right? So that's the point of sharing that. But if we look at masculine, the point of asking questions for the masculine, right? Contrasting to the feminine, the purpose of asking a question is to find a specific answer. Right? So hopefully you can see just the differences in masculine and feminine culture around questions leads us to this like butting of heads. Right? This opposition, this misunderstanding between each other. Because the feminine is here asking questions, just wanting to start a conversation. Right? But the masculine will often hear that as you're asking questions and you want me to find a specific answer for this. Right? This is where we get the classic like relationship dynamic of husbands, your wife doesn't want you to solve the problems or give you a solution, she just wants you to listen. And this is what that's coming back to, is that purpose of what is the question about? What is the purpose of the question in these different places? Okay. So when we are seeking to then understand, how do we define knowing something? Right? Because we start with a question and we're looking ultimately to get to knowing something. Right? Now, the purpose of that question has different roles, right? One is exploring the possibilities and the other is defining the answers. And both of those are key, important parts of the process. That's the thing. It's like one half of the puzzle. Each has it. Right? If you try and go straight to answering a problem without exploring the possibilities, your thing you're coming to know is going to be pretty limited, right? There's a good, important reason of exploring the possibilities. But if you always stay in just exploring the possibilities and you never go to that masculine point of bringing some definition into it, getting it into a singular, usable purpose, or that's what I'm looking for, single, usable bit, right? The possibilities aren't practical, right? It's just all fun and theory and it's not actionable. Right? So there is this beautiful rhythm back and forth between the masculine and feminine. It is this expansion and then contraction, expansion and then contraction, expansion and then contraction. And that expansion and contraction from an energetic perspective is what gives us that momentum to move forward, right? We need both. It's like the breaststroke, expansion and then contraction, expansion and then contraction, right? And they're meant to be a partnership. Right? And the feminine is the ruler over the possibilities, over the expansion. And the masculine is the ruler over the definition, or the contraction, right? And that's really important because if you don't have the masculine coming into play, you're not embodying things, right? You are simply playing in possibilities, which can be really fun, right? But if you actually want things to change, if you want results, if you want to experience that in your physical life, you have to have that definition happen. You have to bring it into something that is actionable in some way, right? And on the flip side, if you are always focusing on just actionable, 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 you miss out on so much because you are not taking that necessary step of the expansion, of exploring the possibilities. And oftentimes in the masculine, we get so focused on, there is this fear of the expansion, right? But the contraction is safe, it's well defined, it's well known. We want to sort of stay in this place, and the contraction can be very uncertain, right? It's okay, I'm suddenly unbound, right? There are lots of possibilities, lots of things that are accessible here. And that's good because it gives us an ability to sort of like pick and choose what we want to keep, what we want to carry with us into the next round of definition. Right? And going through that necessary process of, again, the expansion and the contraction, expansion and the contraction. We want both of those things there. So the masculine and feminine purpose of how they view questioning is not that one is right and one is wrong, it's that they're two halves of the same whole, right? And how we need to learn to understand each other better so that we can arrive at better knowing. That's the beauty of questioning. Right? So from a masculine perspective, this is where speculation often comes in. Right? Masculine is oriented on you ask questions to get specific answers, and if we don't have specific answers yet, exploring possibilities, it can lead to speculation. Right? So the idea of speculation being bad is it messes up the energy where it gets too diffuse. Right? So we've gone so far away from where we were in that original contraction state that it's really hard to get that momentum and energy back. Right? And the masculine is the ruler over the contraction, right? So he's going to be very aware of that, very conscientious of that, very sensitive of that, and speaking to, remember, we don't want to get too diffuse. We can go to other possibilities, right? That's where the feminine often misunderstands, is viewing this as the masculine is saying, oh, we can't go and explore any of those things. When ideally the masculine is saying, or in a space, I'm going to change the wording on that. When the masculine is in an aligned space, right, or healthy expression, it's not about cutting off or limiting possibilities. It's about making sure we have the necessary momentum to be able to get there. Right? On the flip side, the feminine is ruler over the expansion. So she is very conscientious of when we're becoming too contracted and we're staying in this tight space and getting really narrow-minded becomes like one of the things, right? We're focusing in on this idea, one thing, getting so contracted, it's time for another expansion, right? And that's part of her role, because the same way we can go too diffuse and we lose all the momentum, we can become too direct and we lose all the momentum. We pinch it off, close it off, right? And so the feminine comes in to be like, oh, we've been closing off. That signals a trigger in her to want to do the expansion. And so you have this inherent like check and balance between the two of them to keep each other on this path where we're moving forward in this upward place where together they need each other. We need that contraction and we need that expansion, and they're working interdependently with one another, right? Not codependently, not independently, interdependently, needing this dance with one another as they move forward. Right? So that's a beautiful example of hopefully helping you understand better where we sometimes hear these different things coming up, right? Masculine, and is why it's valuable to learn to be able to identify masculine and feminine energies, because if you can recognize, oh, okay, masculine is talking, here's where they're coming from, here's the things that they're discussing and saying, it becomes easier to know, okay, I understand what they're saying and where they're coming from. But also can hopefully help you feel validated and understanding there's this other side of the experience and story. And right now in humanity, as a human collective, right, we're all learning how to better have this interdependency in our relationships and how to fine-tune that, how to learn to work together, how to see each other as two halves of the whole instead of being opposing forces. Right? And this can become tricky because some of the basics on masculine and feminine energy, which again refer to that Instagram post that's pinned on my profile, Base Camp Belonging. But in short, masculine and feminine energy start inherently inverted and opposite, which is why when you are stepping into a healthier expression of masculine and feminine energy, breaking free of any enmeshment or codependency that has been going on, it can feel like you're at odds with each other. But that's part of just the starting point with each other. What becomes really cool is when you learn the patterns and the processes of the masculine and the feminine, you learn how to go from that inverted and opposite place through this journey and process that syncs you up and brings you into a point of unity and connection. Right? And that inverted and opposite place is just the starting point. It's creating that necessary momentum to move you forward and sync you up. Right? Understanding these things is one of my favorite things to help people learn about. We go over understanding masculine and feminine, understanding this process of how do you go from being at odds with each other to being fully synced up with one another. It's what I do in my group programs and my private work, and is what I discuss here in the content. So hopefully you found this helpful, looking at the ideas of questioning and speculation from this masculine and feminine perspective. I'd love to hear from you in the comments about what was helpful to you, what were your takeaways, what additional questions did this bring up for you, right? We could be here for a long time going in and talking about stuff. And in fact, on that note, for those of you who are interested in wanting to learn, okay, great, I can understand this better, but how am I supposed to, an alarm here going off on my computer. How am I supposed to actually practice that and apply that in my relationships, right? I am going to be doing a part 2 to this video, and that part 2 will go over 3 specific tools that you can use in knowing how to better understand and navigate your communication to make it easier, right? But I will give you one takeaway as a little teaser now, and if you want to explore the other 2, come check out my monthly membership program and my Patreon, where you get exclusive access to additional content and videos, as well as my weekly workshops where we do group coaching. You can come with your questions, get those things answered. It's a wonderful resource. So if you're interested in learning more about that, just type details in the comments and I'll send you over more information. Or you can head to the link again in my Instagram bio to check out those membership options. So part 2 will be in the membership, but we'll leave you with this takeaway, which is if you are in the feminine, right, and you are wanting to explore possibilities, right, set that up at the start of the conversation, right? Instead of starting the conversation with the direct question, start the conversation from the place of, hey, I want to have a conversation with you and play with some ideas or explore some possibilities. I'm not looking for a specific answer right now. I'm looking to brainstorm. Would you like to do that with me? Right? When you set it up from that place, you're communicating to the masculine to understand, hey, I'm going to ask you a question, but it's not the way you're used to thinking about questions. Here's what I'm actually looking for. So make it easier for the masculine to be able to understand why you're asking the question, what you're looking for as a result of it, and make the communication often go so much easier. If you want more tips on the masculine and feminine, follow Basecamp Belonging. Check out all things that we've got going on and be sure to share, like, comment below. Hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.